Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nazir daf lamed tet. Today's daf is sponsored by Sylvia Klein in memory of her father, Sherman Israel Klein, Shnei Yisrael ben Yerachmi al Basara, on his 11th year at site. Zechrono lebracha. He loved Torah, learning, and the Jewish people. Okay, we're going to get started. Before we get started, two brief announcements. I'll remind everybody the beginner's course is starting on Sunday with Rabbi Elazar. It's part 2, but you didn't have to do part 1 in order to join, although I will recommend that you listen to part 1 if you haven't listened to it yet. It will give you a lot of background information. This class will give you more background information. There's always more background information that's helpful. We'll try to run this once a year to basically continue increasing your knowledge of the background information to Gemara. It's a course, by the way, that I know the first course was taken by people from all different levels of learning because the perspective that Rabbi Elazar has is just interesting to add information that even learners who've been learning for a number of years might not be familiar with. Number 2, we've organized on our site that we've been doing now for the holidays is all the materials that relate to the holidays. So there's Purim learning on the website. If you want to learn, all you have to do is search button on the website, search Purim, and you'll get to the page that we've organized for you a number of dapim that are relevant, some that relate to the halachot of Purim, some that relate to, there's a whole section in Megillah and drashot on the Megillah, which is interesting to listen to, and other shiurim that as we have, different weekly content or some daily, like talking Talmud, all the shiurim that are related to those dapim are all organized now for you, whatever relates to Purim, and then you can listen to those shiurim. If you want more, by the way, there's Hebrew. So at the bottom of the page for the English, there's a link to the Hebrew, and then there's other shiurim in Hebrew. Okay, we'll get started now with our daf. We're starting at the bottom of Lamed Zayin. We had a whole long discourse on heiter, mitztaref, iser, and on tam ki ikar, and the whole big debate about which one we learn from the Nazir pasuk, from the word mishrat. Now we have a question on. We're going to start. Amalei Rav Ashi, the Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi asked Rav Kahana the following question on Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva said, we're going to learn from Mishrat heiter mitztaref le'isr, right? That again, this means if I eat a kazayat of bread, and within that kazayat of bread, there's some wine, not enough of a shiur, but altogether, I'm eating wine and bread, which we learned yesterday has to be of equal amounts of wine and bread. Otherwise, the wine will be kind of absorbed by the bread, or nullified. But if they're equal parts or there's more wine, then eating them together will be eating a requisite amount of forbidden items. So Rav Ashi asked Rav Kahana the following question. Elahadei Tanya, but there's a braita that says, we're 4 lines from the bottom of Lamed Zayin and Mebet. Mikol asher ye'aseh migefen hayayin, from all that comes from, if you remember, that was the prat, klal, prat, right? It was specific. It gave wine and vinegar and grapes and all that. Then it said anything that comes from the vine. And then it said hartzanim va'adzag, right? The pits, the seeds, and the skins. So then it says here, limed al isurei nazir, this general verse comes to teach you, shehen mitztarfim zeim zed, that all the different items join together so that if I eat a little bit of hartzan, a little bit of zag, a little bit of a grape, something like that, if I ate a kazayat of all of that together, I'll be liable, which we saw that in the Mishna. Well, Rabbi Akiva, Hashi Yesh Lomar Heter Mitztaref L'Isra, the word Mishrat taught us that we can combine permitted items and forbidden items to get to the amount of a kazayat. Isur L'Isur Mabaya, why would I even need a verse to teach me that I can combine different forbidden items to get to a kazayat? Of course I can do that. In other words, if Heter and Isur combines, then of course Isur and Isur combines. Forbidden item and forbidden item, of course they're going to combine. If even a permitted item will count for me toward my kazayat. Obviously, then if I didn't have enough and I ate something else that was forbidden, of course it'll combine. So that seems to be a really big contradiction against Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva has a very easy answer, or Rav Kahana answers Rav Ashi about Rabbi Akiva. Amar le, hetir li'isur b'vatacha, isur li'isur afilu b'zarach hazeh. When we talk about heter mitztaref li'isur, we're talking about if you eat the bread combined with the wine at the same time, right? You're not eating bread and then eating wine and saying, oh, let's join those for kazayat. But if I eat some seeds and then I eat some peels and then I eat some of the fruit itself, one after the other, now it would have to be within Kedechila process. We saw that whole amount of time. But let's say within 9 minutes, I ate a little bit of that, then I ate a little bit of that, then I ate a little bit of that. They will join together. But if I ate a little bread and then I drank a little wine, we're not going to say the bread and the wine combined. So therefore, there's still a need to teach this Isur, mitztaref, and Isur, because it's true they use the same language, this joins with that, but it's not the same kind of joining together. The Rabbi Shimon, what about this opinion that we saw? The Rabbi Shimon, the late Seir, he doesn't think there is such a thing that they join together. If you remember, Rabbi Shimon doesn't even hold that there's a requisite amount. He thinks any grape you eat, it doesn't matter the size, you're already liable. So according to him, you don't need that pasuk to teach you that grapes and the seeds and the pits can all and the peels can all combine, because there's no need to combine anything. So what does he do with this general pasuk? He could say, they find a different opinion of Rabbi Shimon that we also learned in the beginning of the Masechet, which was, he claims that if you say, I'm going to be a Nazir and I won't drink wine, but I want to be mitamei l'metim, or, the other things I don't really care about. So he says you're not a Nazir at all. If you remember, there was a machloket. Nobody thinks that you can take on partial Naziru. But one opinion is to say, what you meant is when you said I'm not drinking wine, you really meant I'm going to be a complete Nazir. You just only related to the wine element. By the way, you didn't really say, and I am going to be mitamei l'metim. I was just kind of adding it as if that's implied. But since it's only implied and you don't really say that, we assume you meant everything. Rabbi Shimon says, we assume no. We assume you meant only wine. And because you meant only wine, there's no such thing. And therefore, you didn't say anything. And you're not even a Nazir. So he says, Mikol asher yaseh, what he's saying is, even though it's a pasuk that's dealing specifically with the wine, he uses it to derive, or at least we think that maybe he derives his answer from there. That means all these things together are forbidden to you. And if you forbid only one of them, you're not actually going to be a Nazir. So that was the first part where we deal with this question on Rabbi Akiva's approach from this drasha, Mikol asher yaseh, Isur le'Isur. Well, why would you need Isur le'Isur if it's obvious the heiter mitztaref, if we already learned heiter mitztaref Isur? And the point is they're teaching different things. And then we just kind of jumped to Rabbi Shimon and said, how does he learn this pasuk different from the drasha we just saw in the bright? Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Okay, Rabbi Abahu appears here. He also appeared on Daf Lamed Hey at the bottom. That started us on this whole thing about heiter mitztaref Isur. He was the one who quoted Rabbi Yochanan, who said, "Kol isurin shebetorah ein heiter mitztaref Isur chutz misurei Nazir sharei amra Torah mishchat." That's what got us on this whole thing. Rabbi Yochanan, who said, and then we saw that it was also Rabbi Akiva's opinion, the heiter mitztaref Isur is a unique halacha by Nazir. Okay, now that was where we started. Rabbi Abahu, by the way, if you want to learn more about him, since he appears a lot in these psukim, Shuli Mishkan and Flashback this week wrote all about him, historically who he was. Okay, he was obviously from Israel. That's why he's also quoting all the Amoraim from Israel, Rabbi Yochanan, and then now Rabbi Elazar, who was one of the main students of Rabbi Yochanan. So now he quotes, Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Kol revi'iyot shebetorah ein heter mitztaref Isur chutz mirevi'it shebenazir. Sounds very similar to Rabbi Yochanan with one big difference. He says, all the revi'iyot shebetorah, all the quarter logs in the Torah. Okay, log is a measurement. A quarter log comes out to about 86.4 milliliters, according to what they say. Again, there's always debates about these shiurim, but we can go with that. 86.4 milliliters. That is the size of a revi'it. Okay, it's a quarter of a log. So, all revi'iyot in the Torah, we don't combine, okay? You have some problematic truma wine and it mixes with non-truma wine. We don't call, right? We don't say, oh, if you ate, let's say you drank a revi'it of that mixed substance, you didn't actually drink a revi'it of truma. So we don't say heter is mitztaref le'Isur, except for the revi'it of the Nazir. Because the Torah says mishrat. From mishrat we learn for the revi'it of the Nazir. So Ma'i Kabem Rabbi Yochanan the Rabbi Elazar. What's the difference between the two of them? Because they both said it's unique halacha to Nazir. Well, Ikabenayu Rabbi Yochanan merabe afilu ochalim. Rabbi Elazar mashkin in media charina lo. Rabbi Yochanan said it relates to food as well. Rabbi Elazar says it's only liquids. Okay, that's the main difference between them. So he's limiting heter mitztaref Isur, not just to Nazir like Rabbi Yochanan did, but also just to drinks of the Nazir because it's talking about the wine. Okay, and therefore only drinks and not the solids. Amal Rabbi Elazar, since we're on the topic of revi'it and the Nazir and his revi'it, Rabbi Elazar says, Estel revi'iotem. There's 10 cases where the halacha is a revi'it halo. V'nakid Rav Kahana biyadeh, chamesh sumakata v'chamesh chivarata. Rav Kahana said, let's make it easy for people to remember. We're going to say there's 5 red and there's 5 white. Chamesh sumakata. And then he gives a mnemonic device for each one. So already you can remember it easily because you remember 5 red, 5 white. And then he's going to have a line for each one. So for the 5 red, he has this sentence that will help you remember this. Nazir v'oseh pesach shehoru b'mikdash v'metu. So here's your way to remember it. A Nazir, it sounds like the beginning of a joke. A Nazir and someone doing the Pesach that taught in the temple and died. Maybe a bad joke. Okay, but here's the line, and this is how we're gonna remember it. So what are the 5 cases? So there's Nazir, oseh pesach, horu, they taught in the mikdash, and they died. So revi'it, Nazir, we know is ours. Revi'it yain, we're on red ones. So we're talking about wine in this case. Not all the red is going to be wine. Revi'it yain le Nazir that's our case. In order to be liable for a Nazir, you need a revi'it. And also, he was the one who said it's heiter mitztaref list. Oseh pesach, what's this? When you drink the 4 cups of wine on Pesach, you have to have a revi'it of wine in each cup. And that's what people, they measure how much matzah, what's a kazayit, they measure how much wine, they make sure that your cup has enough of a revi'it. Okay, you can't use a really small cup. Shehoru, shata revi'it yain al yoreh. You drink a revi'it of wine, you cannot teach. Okay, you're not allowed to teach when you're not clear-headed. As soon as you drink a revi'it, you're no longer clear-headed, you can't teach. B'mikdash, you're not allowed to go into the temple drunk. So if you drank a revi'it, that's enough to consider you drunk, that you can't go into the temple. And if you did, you're liable the death penalty. Pretty serious. V'metu, what's this? D'tanya minayin l'revi'it dam, she'yotza mishnei metim, shehi mitama ba'oha. So how do you know that, here's an issue of, if you're in a tent, okay, this is what's called tumat oel, and there's a dead body in the tent, everything, right? People become tameh, utensils become tameh, impure, all that. If there's blood from a dead body, you also become tameh, but it has to be, again, a requisite amount, right? If it's a dead body, it's a kazayit. If it's the blood, it's a revi'it. But now they say, this unique halacha he wants you to know is that if you have a revi'it that came not from one dead body, but from 2 different, so you had, let's say, an eighth of a log from one body and an eighth of a log from another body, so that together will combine to be chayav you in an oha. Shene'amal al kol nafshot met lo yavo. Because on all nafshot met, because it says, this is, by the way, a Kohen Gadol. He's not allowed to become impure to nafshot mate. Now, it could have said nefesh mate, singular. Why did it say it in plural? They learned from here that 2 bodies, 2 bloods, the blood from 2 bodies together can join for that requisite amount. Okay, it happens to be that some of these things are a bit of a debate. Like that happens to be, I think that one's a source of debate. The Nazir one is a source of debate because remember, there's either kazayit or revi'it, which raises the whole question, because what's going to happen in this sugya is we're going to have these 5 red, the 5 white, and then the Gemara is going to ask, why did you say 10? There's more than 10. And then they bring a whole bunch of cases, and almost in all of the answers, they're going to say, main answer, although there will be one other one, is that these are subjects of debate, and Rabbi Elazar wasn't mentioning ones that were subjects of debate, which is not fully true, because some of these are also subjects of debate, just so you should know. I don't have a good answer for that, but it's definitely a bit of an issue with this sugya. Hamesh chivarata. Then there's 5 whites. So what are the 5 whites? Okay, so again, let's just go through the 5 that we had. Nazir, that was our case with the wine of the Nazir, and let's just review why they're all red. Oseh pesach, that's wine, right? It's always red wine on Pesach, even though theoretically you could drink white wine, but in those days all the wine was red. Horu, okay, this is also about drinking wine, and the mikdash is about drinking wine. So that was the 4 reds were wine. The last red is blood, and that's about the blood combining for tumat oel, for creating impurity in the tent. Next, chamesh chivarata. Now we're on the 5 white. Here's our sentence. Chalat, Nazir, u'mitzorah shenifsalu b'Shabbat. Okay, the chalav, a Nazir, and a mitzorah that became disqualified on Shabbos. Chalat is revi'it shemen l'chalat. Okay, white. Obviously, we don't always really mean white. We mean clear. So we're talking about oil. A bunch of the cases will relate to oil. You need a quarter loaf of oil for the challah. What challah are we talking about? Certainly not the challah on Shabbos. We're talking about, well, it's a debate what we're talking about. One option is to say that we're talking about the chalot that you bring with the Thanksgiving offering. If you remember, you bring 40 different loaves. There's 10 that are chametz. Those we're putting aside. We're not relating to them at all. The revi'it relates to the other 30. The other 30 are made up of chalot matzot, they're called, rikike matzot, and rivuchot. Okay, rivuchot are fried in oil, and they're much more oily. The other ones are less oily. So the two less oily ones together, you use a revi'it halot for them, quarter loaf for those 20 loaves, and for the 10 more oily ones, you use a quarter loaf for those 10. So you can see the ratio is double, because there you're using a quarter loaf for 10, and in the other, you're using a quarter loaf for 20. So that's the revi'it he's talking about with the challah. But some people say, no, we're actually not talking about that. We're talking about the chalot, which is the mincha offering of the Kohen Gadol. If you remember, the Kohen Gadol had to bring what's called a minchat habitin every day. It was a special, it was one of the reasons why they said the Kohen Gadol had to be wealthy, because he had to be able to afford to bring a mincha offering on a daily basis, right? Mincha offerings don't cost a lot of money, but if you're bringing it every single day, it will add up. And he used to have to bring this one in the morning, one at night, but they would kind of put the dough together once a day, and that would require that dough a quarter log of oil. So that's another possibility as to what this challah is referring to. Nazir, and now the Nazir had to bring 20 chalot. So also rikikim, and he didn't bring the rivuchim, he didn't bring the very oily ones. He brought the chalot and the rikikim. And those 20 had the same ratio as the Thanksgiving ones, which was a quarter log for all 20. Revi'it shemen l'nazir, so that's what we just said. That's the revi'it oil that goes in. If you remember, the Nazir brings these 20 loaves together with his sacrifice. We saw that before. So we have the revi'it for either the Thanksgiving or the minchat chabitin, and we have the revi'it shemen for the Nazir that goes with his loaves. Mitzorah, what's that? Revi'it mayim l'mitzorah. One of the things the mitzorah had to do was to slaughter a bird, and the blood would go into a utensil. And in that utensil, that vessel, they put water in, mayim chayim. So you should bring fresh water into that vessel. How much water? A revi'it of water. Shenifsalu, ditznanu shar kol hamashkim tme'in, huslin et hagviyah berevi'it. This isn't, by the way, necessarily white, but it's saying any mashkim, any liquids, okay, which many of them are clear, or some of them are clear. Any liquids, if I drink them, okay, this is a takana of the rabbis, that if I drink something impure, I can no longer eat truma. I become impure for both eating truma, let's say I'm a kohen, and also for touching truma. If I touch it, I will disqualify the truma. So that's if I drank, just by drinking liquids that are impure, that makes me, posel hakviyah, makes my body impure. But until I go to the mikvah, I can't touch truma and I can't eat truma. So this is a halacha. How much liquid do I need to drink in order to make me impure? I have to drink a revi'it. If I drink a little drop, it's not going to make a difference. But if I drink a revi'it, then I'll be impure. And the last one, b'Shabbat, you might remember in Masechet Shabbat, we learned, and we've reviewed this a bunch of times, that when I carry, say, out of my house into the public domain, or I carry in the public domain, I'm only liable for carrying if it is something of significance. If I just have some crumbs in my hand that are not significant at all and not a large amount, not useful for anything, then I'm not liable. Okay? But in order to be liable, I have to carry out something of significance. So what's significance? So for each item, it's something different. So the Mishna says, when it comes to carrying out any other liquids, any other drinks, it's going to be a revi'it. In other words, a revi'it of most drinks is what's going to be a significant amount when it comes to carrying on Shabbat. And also all waste water. Okay, if I have water that's wastewater and I want to get it out of my house, again, the same thing. Only if it's a revi'it will I actually be liable on Shabbat for carrying it out. So that was our chalat, nazir, mitzorah, shenifsalu b'Shabbat. So we have the chalat, which is again minchat chabitin or the Thanksgiving offering, the nazir, which is the oil that goes into the bread offering, the matzah offerings that go with the sacrifice. The mitzora is the water that has to go into the vessel that's going to accept the blood of the bird. Then there's the Nazir. The Nazir were we shenifsilu, right? So this was the truma case that's going to make me impure for truma if I drink tummy liquids. And the last one of Shabbat, which is carrying on Shabbat. The Shiur is a revi. So those were our 10 cases. So now the Gemara is going to say, V'tuleka, what, are there no more? In order to wash your hands, netilat yadayim, what we do before eating bread, you need to have at least a cup. You have to have a revid of water in the cup. And not only that, but if let's say you don't have a lot of water, you can actually use the revid for 2 people. That's what this halacha says. That's the revid. So what do they answer? That is a subject of debate. Some people say it's only for 1 person. And there might even be another debate within that, but we'll leave it at that. No, that's a debate. Subjects of debate are not listed here, even though I did mention to you that a bunch of these are also subjects of debate. So I don't have a good answer for that. They would bring a bowl, an earthenware vessel into the temple. This is for the sota. Okay, we're getting to sota soon. And they would write, if you remember, they wrote the whole parshat sota, and then they dissolve it in the water. The question is, how exactly do they do that? There's no good answer for that. Would they scrape off the ink and put it in the water, or would they put the rock itself, the stone where they would write on it, into the water and it would dissolve by itself? Okay, this actually, I was learning with my husband last night. We were discussing it. He said, you scrape it off. I said, what are you talking about? Don't you just put the thing inside? So then we had this whole debate. We didn't know which was true. So he looked it up. He said, oh yeah, it turns out nobody really knows whether it's this or that. It's interesting that I never knew all these years. I always envisioned it one way. He always envisioned it another way. And apparently it doesn't really say anywhere. Anyway, I guess we'll talk about that when we get to Masechet Sota. So, but it's unclear. It's not really discussed how it was erased, because you would erase, that was the whole deal. You erase the name of God, which is a really big deal. So how exactly you would erase it is a debate, whether you scrape it off or whether you just put it in and it dissolves on its own and erases on its own. So anyway, the point for us is how much water has to go into that bowl where you're going to put all the stuff. That's again what the sota woman ends up drinking. So you put a chatzi log mayim min ha-kior, you take it from the kior in the temple and you put a half a log. Rabbi Yehuda omer revi'it. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, a quarter log, not a half a log. So here you see again debate, but here the revi'it comes up. So again, you know what the answer is going to be, but plugta lo kamayre. They weren't discussing things that are subjects of debate. And that's why Rabbi Elazar didn't add this to his list. Okay, this is, you're about to daven Kriyat Shema, and you see you happen to be next to a pile of urine. So what do? You can either leave, but let's say you have, I don't know, you can't for whatever reason, or you want to just resolve the situation some other way. You can pour water into the urine and that resolves the problem. So, so how much water do you have to put in order to resolve it in this way? The answer is kol shehu, any amount. Rabbi Zakai omer levi'it. Rabbi Zakai says, no, you have to actually put a revi'it of water in order to resolve this. To which again, the Gemara says, so right, why wasn't this on the list? But plugta lo kamari. Last question on this topic, va'ika mikvah. What about a mikvah? Well, what about a mikvah? Isn't a mikvah 40 se'ah? Right? That's a lot more than a revi. So which they say, no. If you wanted to tovel, they used to tovel like needles, for example. They would tovel them in a very small, you could collect a little bit of rainwater. And as long as you had a revi'it, you could tovel your needles in there. Okay, very small, teeny items. So there you have it. Mikvah also revi'it, which the Gemara says, Bar me'ahi de batlua rabbanan. The rabbis eventually canceled that. And they said, even if you want to do your needles, you have to do it in a big mikvah of 40 se'ah. This whole halacha got canceled. So because it got canceled at some point, he didn't put it in his list. That actually makes a lot of sense. Okay, moving on to the next part of our Mishna. Eino chayav, we're back to the Mishnah on Lamed Dalet. It starts at Lamed Dalet Amud Aleph. And if you remember, in the beginning of the Mishnah, it said, let's just go back for a minute and read the Mishnah. It was a Mishnah with a lot of different halachot. So there's three types of things usher for the Nazir, the Tuma, the Tiglachat, the Yotzei Min HaGefen, and then we got into the Yotzei Min HaGefen. Said Kol Yotzei Min HaGefen mitztarefim zeh im zeh, so that's what we said before. And Eino chayav ad she'ochal min ha'anavim kizayit, and you're only liable when you eat a kazayit of the grapes. So now they're going to say, Tanakama, lo medame lahon lechol isurei nazir l'shtia. The important part is the next line. Sorry, I need to read on, even though it didn't say that. The next line is on Lam Dalet Amud Bet, and it says, Mishna Rishona Omeret. Remember this? The first Mishna says, when it talks about liquids, originally they said, Ad sheyishteh revi yain, until you drink a quarter log of wine. This is what we've been discussing. Rabbi Akiva Omer, afilu sharat pitam b'yain, v'yesh b'kdei l'tzaref kazayit chayav. Now, we dealt with that all for a long time about the heter mitztaref l'isur, but we said he disagrees on two counts. Number one, he thinks heter joins with isur. Number two, he says the shiur is kazayit and not a revi'it. So when we're talking about liquid wine, we have kazayit or revi'it, and that's a machlokes. So the question is, what's the root of this machlokes? So again, we're at the top of Amud Bet. Tanakama lo medame lahon lechol isurei nazir l'shtia. Tanakama says the eating grapes and drinking wine, yes, it comes from the same general isur prohibition, but they're two different things. There's food and there's drinks, right? Those are two separate things. And in general, for drinks, usually we generally measure it in this shiur of revi'it as opposed to the kazayit. Rabbi Akiva, kevan dichtiv va'anavim lechim v'yiveshim lo yochal, ma'achila kazayit av kol isurin kazayit. He says, wait a minute, look at the pasuk. If you remember, Rabbi Akiva darshans everything in the Torah, right? Every et, every vav. So he takes this vav very seriously. It says in the pasuk, if you remember, miyayin v'shechar yazir v'chometz yayin v'chometz shechar lo yishteh v'chometz shchat anavim lo yishteh. That's all the liquids, right? Don't drink wine, don't drink vinegar, don't drink bread soaked in wine. And then it says, v'anavim lachem v'yaveshim, and grapes that are fresh and that are dry. Why does it say and? And connects the two. That is telling us that what's true for food is also true for drinks. So therefore, the shiur is going to be the same. So just like for food, it's kazayit, it's also going to be kazayit for the drinks. And that's the basis of their machlokes. So the Tanakama takes the standard approach, which is, in general, we have different shiurim for liquid and solid. But Rabbi Akiva says that might be true in other cases, but in this case, the vav connects them, and therefore it's the same. Moving on to the next part of our Mishnah, v'chayav al hayayin b'fnei atzmo. Okay, so now the Mishnah had said, let's just go back for a quick minute. It says the next line is you're liable for wine by itself. Remember, if you eat each one separately, okay, you eat a kazayit of grapes, a kazayit of the seeds, a kazayit of the skins, etc. You're going to be liable for each one a set of lashes. Then Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah disagreed on two counts. He said, number one, you have to eat shnei chartzanim and a zag. Right? So he seemed to disagree that you don't even need a shiur, and he seemed to disagree that you don't get lashes for each one independently. Okay, so we have again a machlok. So Tanu Rabbanan. So again, the Mishnah generally doesn't tell us what the basis of the halacha was. So we want to know what the basis of the halacha was, and for that you usually find it in midrashei halacha, which connect the halacha to the verses in the Torah. V'anavim lachim v'yiveshim lo yochal. Here's a quote from the pasuk. So they often start out with a quote from the pasuk. This teaches you because it says fresh grapes and dry grapes, even though if you just said the word grapes, it would have included fresh grapes and dried grapes. So why did you have to say fresh grapes and dried grapes? It must be to teach you that you're liable for each one independently. And not only that, from there we learn to all other prohibitions in the Torah. Just like here, it's one type, it's all grapes, but we call them something different. And nowadays we call them raisins and grapes. It's not the same, it's not even the same name. They probably just call them dried grapes and fresh grapes. And that already is enough to call it something different, has a different name. As soon as it has a different name, you're liable for each one separately. So you get a set of lashes if you ate a kazayit of grapes, and a set of lashes if you ate a kazayit of dried grapes. So just like that, likewise, anything. So same thing for any kind of prohibition in the Torah. If you do two things that have, you eat something that's called by two different names, even though it's really coming from the same type, you're going to get a separate set of lashes for each. Here's an example. Interesting, they bring an example very similar, but if you drink grape juice, that's chamar chadata, which is new wine. What's new wine? It's basically grapes that were juiced, right? But haven't turned into wine yet. So grape juice and grapes. Okay, so grapes obviously have juice in them. So therefore, you're going to end up with, you have grape juice and you have grapes, and they're considered the same. What exactly? There's a debate. Most people say it's grape juice. Anu Rabbi, achal chartzan lo keshtayim, al zag lo keshtayim. This is our last sugya for today, which we're only going to finish tomorrow. If you eat a chartzan, okay, that's again, there was a debate about what it is, but we're going to go with chartzanim, remember, is plural, so that means it's the seeds. You ate the seeds, you get malko twice, 2 sets of malko. Okay, that seems weird. Why do you do that? We're going to have to get to it. Achal zag lo keshtayim. If you eat the skins, you also get 2 sets of lashes. Achal chartzan v'zag, again, because chartzan is separately and zag is separate, you're going to get 1 for chartzan, 1 for zag, and a 3rd set. We don't yet know what this 3rd set is, but I'll already explain what Abaye is holding is, because the pasuk says, we're back to where we started today, mikol asher ye'aseh migefen hayayin. From right, it was specific. It gave you all the details. Then it got general again, and then it got specific again. But now we want to forget about making a prat uklalu prat, or forget about the drasha we had before in the beginning of today's daf, which is that teaches you that we can combine them for a shiur. Now we're learning something else from this pasuk. It's interesting. They're learning so many different things. Usually we have these rules. You can only learn one thing. Anyway, they say that in and of itself is another lo taseh. It's basically saying you can't eat a chartzan, you can't eat a zag, you can't eat a grape, you can't eat dry grapes, you can't eat wine, can't drink wine, can't drink vinegar, and you can't eat any of these things. So because it says you can't eat any of these things, that adds another set of lashes. So anything you eat that a Nazir can't eat, you're going to get an extra set of lashes. Forget about that you're going to be liable for chartzanim, separate from zagim, separate from, right, you're going to get a whole separate set. You're also going to get a set of lashes for just an additional set of lashes because you transgress this line, that you can't eat anything that comes from the grapevine. Rav Amar, what are you talking about? You only get 1. And that's, if you ate chartzan and zag, you'll get 2. But if you ate a chartzan, you don't get 2. You get 1. You ate a zag, you only get 1. You ate a chartzan and a zag, okay, 2. Again, you'd have to eat a kezayit of each. Why? What you might have thought, which is, what do you mean? This is a generalization about the same specific thing. You don't get lashes for a general lav, like a phrase that relates in a general way to the specific sin. Okay, we had all the specifics. We had a generalization. That general term is not adding. Okay, Rava makes a lot of sense. In fact, we hold up Rava in general. So you don't get lashes for a lav shebiklalot. Before we move on, I just want to tell you what a lav shebiklalot is, because it comes up in a lot of different places and it means different things in different places. So I'll give you 3 explanations of what a lav shebiklalot is. One is our case, where we have a general term that relates to a bunch of isurim. So we don't get lashes for this. Another one is a very famous pasuk, lo tochlu al adam, don't eat the blood. Okay, don't eat on the blood. So what does this mean? So it actually means a whole bunch of different things. Okay, and this is an interesting pasuk. Okay, from it we derive, remember everything by heart. I'm just going to look at it inside. Right, from it we derive. First of all, the one that's very memorable is a very interesting one, which is don't eat on the blood. It's for the Sanhedrin that killed somebody. If the Sanhedrin basically executes someone to death, they say, oh, you can't eat food that day. After you execute someone, you can't eat food that day, because they learn it from lo tochlu al adam. Okay, that's one. Another one they add is you can't eat meat that's shechted before it's actually dead, because lo tochlu al adam, while it's still bleeding. You can't eat sanctified meat before you sprinkle the blood on the mizbeach. Don't eat the meat until you sprinkle the blood. Okay, lo tochlu al adam. So this means a whole bunch of different things. Now, when you have one pasuk, which means a lot of different things, which is similar to ours, because kol asher yaseh me'agefen means a lot of different things, but it's different because this one includes all sorts of things. It's all one and the same. The other one is totally different. Each one is different from the other. So you're going to end up, you don't get lashes for that. That's the opinion. And then there's something else additional, which is one lav that includes a bunch of things, like lo yavo amoni umoavi. Because it says amoni umoavi, it's got 2 things in it with 1 lo taseh. That's also called a lav shebiklalot. Okay, so now, In our case, we have a debate. It could be that their debate is only about this type of lav shebiklalot, about whether you get lashes or whether you don't get lashes. So Abaye says you get lashes, and with him, we're going to have a question. Mativ Rav Papa. Rav Papa asks a question on Abaye, and he says, Rabbi Elazar or Elazar, I'm not sure which one, Omer, Nazir, shehu shote yayin kol hayom. He says, let me just look for a second which one this is. Rabbi Elazar, okay. So Rabbi Elazar says, Nazir shehu shote yayin kol hayom. If I drink wine all day long, okay, first of all, in order to get lashes, you have to warn me. So let's say you warn me in the morning, you're a Nazir. If you drink wine, see me about to drink, you say, if you drink wine, you're going to get lashes. And I say, okay, I don't care, and I drink it. And then I drink later in the day, and then I drink another cup, and I drink a whole bunch of times that day. So I'm only going to be liable one, because I drank once, and as I drank with one warning, basically, okay? And that's considered one drinking, even though I spread it out across the day. But amrulo, al tishteh, if every time before I picked up my cup to drink, you said to me, wait, don't drink, you're a Nazir. If you drink, you're going to get lashes. And then I drink anyway, then I'm going to be liable for each individual drinking. That's not relevant to our purposes. But now we're going to have a case where somebody does a bunch of different things that cause them to be liable for lashes in a number of different things. And this matches what we saw before, that you're liable for each and every one. So let's see what this person did. And the Gemara loves to talk about this. A person who did this, that, the other thing, and gets X number of set of lashes. So I ate fresh grapes, dry grapes. Hartzanim, I ate the seeds. Vizagim, and I ate the peels. V'sachat eshkol shel anavim, and I squeezed a bunch of grapes. V'shatan, I drank it. Lokech hamesh, because I did 5 things. Now, what's the obvious question against Abaye? If you're going to get 5 sets of lashes, and I did 5 actions, according to Abaye, I should also get, because I went against kol asher yaseh migefen hayayin, which is an additional one, right? I don't get that on each one. I don't get double, but I should get another set of lashes. So he says, Ihachi, if you're right, lo keshesh, chat mikol asher yaseh, should get an additional set for that. To which Abaye answers, a classic answer, when there's a list and there's a number in a Tanaitic source, we say, Tana b'shir, he just left it out. Now, if you want to give this answer up, the Tana gave a list, he gave a number, but he didn't include in that everything. By the way, this is similar to our list before. Why didn't Rabbi Elazar include all these things? A little bit different. First of all, that's not a Tanaitic source. Anyway, so now we say his approach is to answer, he left some things off. But if you give that answer, it's always preceded by a question. It's always followed by a question. My shiur the high shiur. What else did he leave off the Tana? Because the Tana doesn't just leave off one thing. If there's 6 lashes, he wouldn't say 5. If there's 7, maybe, because there's a few other things, he might leave off a few things. That's the theory. You can argue with it, but that's their theory. Always. It doesn't make sense to leave one off. If you're leaving a bunch off, then I could see he gave a not complete list, incomplete list. So my shiur the high shiur. So what else was left off? Shiur lo yachel dvaro. Remember lo yachel dvaro from Nidarim? You take a vow and you don't keep it. You went against your word. So a person who eats grapes after he became a Nazir is obviously going against his word. That would be another set of lashes. To which the Gemara rejects Abaye's answer and says, no. That's not something left out. That's left out for a different reason. This is a list of lashes. How he knows this, I don't know. But this is a list of lashes, says Rav Papa, that's unique to Nazir. And lo yachel devaro is, right? So this list is midi de lo ite b'duchta achrita, things that don't appear anywhere else, like eating grapes. You wouldn't get lashes for any other reason. But lo yachel devaro ite b'nidarim, but not keeping your word comes up in many other places, any kind of vow you make. So therefore, that's not considered the Tana left it off. That just wasn't in the context of what the Tana would even have thought of mentioning. But Amalei Ravina mi Parzikia, he answers the question. He says to Ravashi, V'hashiel de ben abinayim. He says, okay, this is, by the way, Rav Papa asked this question, apparently wasn't answered in his time, and only Rabbi mi Parzikia tells Ravashi, I got something. He left off the ben abinayim. Remember the ben abinayim? We talked about that the peels sometimes have the skin, sometimes have some grape on them. That's in between the skins and the fruit, there's a little bit there. That's another thing that he left off. Because if you ate a kazayit of that, of the pulp of it, you would end up with being liable. So now we have an answer. So let's just get the structure before we go on to the very interesting part of the sugya, which we're really going to see the more interesting part tomorrow, but I'll kind of pique your curiosity here, the end of today's daf, which is, so Abaye had said you get an extra set of lashes because kol hasheyaseh. Comes Rav Papa and he says there's a braita of Rabbi Elazar that says that if you did the following 5 things, you get 5 sets of lashes and no more. And then he asked Abaye, and Abaye said, you left off some things. We eventually come up with 2 things he left off. Number 1, he left off kol hasheyaseh, this general thing, and he left off the bein habeinayim pulp. So now Rav Papa says, Elam Rav Papa, lo tanya midi chamesh. Once Abaye comes up with an answer, or the truth is, it's interesting because Ravina Miparzikia said to Rav Ashi, maybe it was at the same time. Actually, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it wasn't at the same time. He comes up with this answer. And then Rav Papa says, Lo Tanya Midi Chamesh. It actually doesn't say in the Braita 5. To which they say, what do you mean it doesn't say 5? Vaha Otve Chamesh. But didn't you bring a Braita and you said that Rabbi Elazar said 5? Now all of a sudden Rav Papa is changing his tone and saying it really doesn't say 5 in the Braita. It doesn't say 5 in the Braita. Then why did he say it said 5 in the Braita? And for that interesting question, or I would say the answer is even more interesting, we're going to have to wait till tomorrow. So let's do a quick review of our page. We started off with and ended off with it's kol asher yaseh migefen hayayin. And in the beginning of the daf, it was to say basically about seiruf, that we combine all these things to equal a kazayit in order to make you liable. And then that was used as a question on Rabbi Akiva, who says heiter mitztaref l'isser. Why would you need a pasuk to teach you isser mitztaref l'isser? To which he explained it. And then we brought the opposing opinion about this whole thing in general, not about heiter mitztaref l'isser, but about kol asher yaseh migefen hayayin is coming to teach you something different. And there's no issue of seiruf because we don't even need a kazayit. That was a whole different approach. Then we brought Rabbi Abahu b'shem Rabbi Elazar. He brought Rabbi Elazar after he brought Rabbi Yochanan before, who said heiter mitztaref l'isser only by Nazir, like Rabbi Yochanan, but only in the revi'it shiur, in the liquids. And then Rabbi Elazar himself brought 10 places where revi'it is mentioned, and we had the mnemonics that Rav Kahana brought us, and then we remember those five red and the 5 white. And then we brought, after we finished all that, that was Amud Aleph, then we moved to Amud Bet, then we had this debate. We went back to the Mishna, the debate about, is it a revi'it or a kazayit, and where do they get that from, right? The whole job of the Gemara now is to try to figure out what's the basis for these Tanaitic debates. It was also what they did in the beginning, right? Like, where are the sources for these Tanaitic debates? So the Tanaitic debate is ve'anavim, does that connect? Meaning what's true for foods is true for the wine and it's kazayit. That was the Rabbi Akiva's approach, versus the rabbis who say no, generally liquids are revi'it and solids are kazayit. That we're going to keep true for the Nazir as well. Then we moved on to this. Everything is unique if it has a different name. And then we learned from Nazir to all the Torah Kula, because it said on Avim lachim v'yeveshim. We took a drasha on that and we said, since it says dried and fresh, which is totally unnecessary, it could have just said on Avim. We learned not only for Nazir, everywhere else, if it has a different name, then you're already liable, whole separate set of lashes. From that, we got into actually how many sets of lashes do you get for all these things? According to Abaye, 2. According to Rava, 1. For each thing you eat, you get 1 set of lashes. Abaye says, no, you get 2 because of this kol hasheyaseh. And Rava said, no, that's a lav shebiklalot. You don't get lashes for lav shebiklalot. And Abaye apparently thinks that you get lashes for lav shebiklalot. It's a good question about whether Abaye would say, is it only this type of lav shebiklalot, or would it also apply to lo tuchlu al adam, that he would think you get lashes for any one of those things? Right? Rava will say that's a lav shebiklalot. You don't get lashes for any of them. It could be Abaye would agree there and is only disagreeing about our particular case. And then Rav Papa brought this question Abaye from a Braita that listed 5 things. Abaye comes up with a resolution and says, they were leaving off a bunch of things. Right? Not only did they leave off my thing, they left off something else. We ended up, he didn't come up with the answer, but someone else did. To which then Rav Papa responds and says, actually, the Braita didn't say 5. And then we have to figure out, why didn't the Braita say 5 if really it's 5? By the way, just to point out, according to Rava, it would be 6 because of this issue of the bein habeinayim. And according to Abaye, it would be 7. So really none of them matches 5 at this point. So then Rav Papa says, oh, it didn't really say 5. And now obviously we're going to have to figure out, why did you say it said 5 and it really didn't say 5? That's it for today. Wishing everybody a great day. Don't forget to register for the beginner's course and check out the content on Purim. Have a great day, everyone.